Well, good morning, Foundations. It is great to be back, especially in a series as I've listened for the last couple weeks about what it means for Jesus to be, particularly today, our shepherd. Because I think we all need a shepherd. Whether you're facing uncertainty, dealing with insecurity, job transfers, changes, getting married, going through a transition of losing a marriage, we all need somebody to shepherd us through the difficulties in life. I'm often amazed as you go through different seasons. I've been married about 24 years now, how often God will need you to give shepherding through different seasons, whether you're first married or you're facing postpartum in those years or facing the difference between married without kids and married with kids. I remember one of the times we really needed shepherding was when my wife and I moved into our first house. We were in our 23 years old, and early into that process, a couple months in, we found out we were pregnant. I don't know how that happened, but suddenly we're pregnant in our new house, and my wife is suddenly just sick as can be. And all of a sudden, this house looked so good from the outside. Now she could smell things she couldn't smell before. You know what I'm talking about? And now I'm like, God, help me shepherd my wife and my family here through this season. And she's like, we got to replace all the carpet. They had a dog here before, and I can smell it. It makes me want to throw up every minute of every day. Well, how do God shepherd me through the finances here? We just spent the money on the down payment of the house. We don't have the money to replace the carpet. And I remember bringing out a utility knife. My wife is laying there just sick as can be, sitting in the waterbed. And I took out the utility knife and cut the carpet around the bed. And I'm just dragging it out. I'm like, I don't smell anything. I think it's fine. I grab the carpet and I throw it around my back. And so I'm basically underneath the underside of the carpet as I'm pulling that thing. I mean, it was the worst. I'm like, oh my goodness, now I see what you're smelling. And it was amazing during that season how 9 months of pregnancy, my wife was sick most of that, and God really needed to shepherd me through how to be a husband, how to provide, how to take care of her during that time. It also reminded me that many of us look good from the outside like my house did. We look good from a distance. We look good until you look underneath the surface. Under the surface, we all stink quite a bit. Under the surface, we all got stuff we need shepherded through. Shame, sometimes it's addiction, sometimes it's secrets and behaviors we don't want other people to know. Sometimes you need shepherded through insecurity. It's interesting, I turned 44 this year, and I'm starting to find something I didn't struggle with most of my life was insecurity is starting to show up. And of course, my kids are nice enough to remind me all the time. My son runs camera for us, and so I'll sit here worshiping somewhere in this area. He says, Dad, you got to sit someplace else. Why? Your bald spot is starting to show up in my camera shot these days. God shepherd me through how to parent an 18-year-old. It's funny, I started snoring a couple years ago, and my wife's like, this is really ridiculous, and I want to sleep in a separate room. So she goes, why don't you try one of those CPAP machines? I'm like, oh, God, shepherd me through how to handle this. If you don't know what these machines are, you stick this oxygen mask, you feel like Bane, You were born in the darkness. It's just ridiculous, and you can't kiss your wife. And so I put this thing on for the first time. It's a lot like a leaf blower. If you ever used a leaf blower before, imagine shoving that in your face every night before you go to bed. But you don't realize it. And so my wife's coming to bed. I'm like, good night, honey. And she's like, can't hear me. I'm like, good night, honey. And she hears, good night, honey. And so I pull the mask off, to say goodnight to her. It's like, I don't realize the pressure's been building up, And so it's like, good night. I mean, it's just the seasons of life, the insecurities of life. We need a shepherd to help guide us through the weird stuff and the fun stuff and the difficult stuff in life. About 7 years ago, I got a call from a family, and their son had been golfing right across the street, a golf course from our church. And a tree branch had fallen over and cracked his skull open, literally, and he'd been rushed to the ER. So I walked into the hospital. The news had gotten to me. I didn't know the family. They'd been attending for a while, but I didn't meet them until this moment. As I walked into the hospital, their son was laying there, and all indications was he was probably going to die. And they were looking to me as their shepherd of their church to give them advice. And I was praying a prayer like, God, I have no idea what to say. I don't want to give them false hope. I don't want to give them no hope. What do I say, Father, that you could be their shepherd during this difficult moment? I felt like God whispered to me, nudged me, gave me an impression to say, tomorrow has enough trouble of its own. Jesus' words from the Sermon on the Mount. Trust me in this moment. And I said, well, what let's do? Let's trust God, not for the next day, not for the future. That's too much to worry about. Let's trust God for the next 5 minutes to lead us, to provide us the courage, the strength, the wisdom we need. And several years later, their son actually did survive, and he did recover. He still can't use most of the left side of his body. But over the years, as they volunteer in our church, they say, man, that was so helpful not to be overwhelmed with everything, but to think, God, just lead me as my shepherd for the next 5 minutes. That's what survived us that day, that week, and that next month. We all need a shepherd. More than that, what I want to propose to you today is that not only do we need a shepherd, I want to propose that we all have a shepherd. There right now is something in your life that is leading you. Now, you might say it's God. I might say it's God or Jesus. But even though I say that, that's not always what really determines the decisions I make, why I choose this versus that, why I go this way versus this way, why I feel fearful, why I feel angry, why I feel disappointed. We all have a shepherd. It's not always God really leading our life, even though we say it is. So we all have a shepherd, but we all need a good shepherd. And Jesus wants to be our good shepherd. Look what he says in the book of John. He says, here's what it means for me to be a shepherd. I am, that'll be very important, you'll see in a few minutes, the good shepherd in contrast to a bad shepherd. The good shepherd gives his life for the sheep. You can trust me. I'm going to give myself for you. A hireling, a different kind of shepherd that you may be following, he who is not the shepherd, he doesn't own the sheep. He doesn't care about the sheep. He sees problems coming into your life. He sees a wolf coming into your life. He leaves the sheep and flees, and the wolf catches the sheep and scatters them. And he contrasts here different shepherds. There's a good shepherd who cares about you, you can follow. And then there's a bad kind of shepherd that literally doesn't care about you, and danger comes and he's out of there. Think of it this way. A sheep who's following a shepherd has a pretty limited view, right? For the most part, that sheep just sees the back of the heels of a shepherd. And often when we look at our lives, we see the back of God's heels. We don't see the big picture. What are you doing? I'm not sure if I can trust you. I'm not sure if you know where we're going. God, I just see the back of your heels sometimes. And God says, I want you to know you can trust me to be a good shepherd to lead you in your life. In fact, in some Jewish midrash, they've said the reason that God appeared in a pillar of fire and a pillar of cloud is because he wanted the people to see the view as if those were legs moving through the desert. And they were sheep seeing legs moving before them to remind them of the metaphor of a sheep and a shepherd. So the question is, if we all have a shepherd, I want to propose to you that many of us have very bad shepherds. Not God leading our shepherds, some very bad shepherds. And one of the can of worms that I open when I think about the shepherds that really lead my life, I think of spam. Spam, if you like Monty Python, Spam-a-lot. Spam, it's disgusting, man. You open that thing up and there's a big pink thing comes out and they call it meat or whatever it is. I want to propose to you that many of us, all of us, every week, instead of letting God shepherd our life, we let spam shepherd our life. Spam, status, performance, appearance, and money. We say God's our shepherd, but really we make decisions based on, will this get me more status or will it not? We feel depressed because we lost our status, not as many friends. We lost our status because we're going through retirement and we're wondering whether or not we still have meaning and purpose in our life. Because instead of God giving us our identity, our status gave us our identity. Our performance. We feel good when our numbers are high. We feel bad when our numbers are low. Because our sense of identity is not coming from God. It's coming from our performance. For others of us, I talked about insecurity of losing my hair and gaining weight. And it's appearance. We say God's our shepherd, but we really feel good when we look good and we feel bad when we look bad. The insecurity in our lives is because we've allowed this can of spam to shepherd us. This has become our real shepherd. And when you follow the shepherd, you lead to three doors. The door of fear, never done enough, never can have enough. Money, don't have enough in my savings, I haven't spent enough, I haven't given enough. Anger, I can't believe that I'm not getting the approval I need. Lust, you're always lusting after more approval, lusting after more. The good shepherd Jesus offers is one that doesn't lead to these doors. It doesn't lead to fear and anger and lust. Instead, it leads to life and life more abundant. As I want to show you how you can have a secure shepherd who will lead you wisely. You can avoid a lot of pain in your life and find a personal God who cares about you. To do that, I want to give you a little history of what was going on during the day with Jesus and some of the bad shepherds they had and why when he used the phrase good shepherd, it was pregnant with meaning. I'll start with some bad shepherds. One of the most famous bad shepherds that was going on during the Greco-Roman world that Jesus taught to, his name was Pan. Now, you may have seen him from a Disney movie or other cartoons. Pan was this half-human, half-goat god that was very popular in the Greco-Roman world. In fact, Pan was known as the shepherd. He played a flute, and the flute was actually called the Pan after his name. And even though he's shown as cute in the movies, he was everything but cute. Worship of Pan was debaucherous. It was basically like, music was played. It was chaotic. In fact, we get the name Panic from his name and pandemonium from his name. This shepherd, the shepherd they knew in those days, his job was to come in and bring chaos into your life. And God says, don't follow this God, the shepherd you know in the Greco-Roman culture. Don't listen to his music. Don't follow his music. This is not the shepherd that will lead you to life. Think of it this way. Jesus says, I am the good shepherd who gives my life for my sheep. That's the kind of shepherd who gives the sheep for his lust. In fact, he was always shown in statues as being aroused because he was trying to get you to always want pleasure. And hedonism is always about more and more and more. It was always about sacrificing everything to feed your own lust. That's what Pan was all about. In fact, I know Carl led a trip recently, a few weeks ago, or maybe a month ago, to Caesarea Philippi. Let me show you a little bit about Pan worship. If you come to Caesarea Philippi, one of the areas that Jesus spoke of, you will see an artist has a drawing what it used to look like. So in those days, you can see there is a giant cave here. And in this cave is a temple to the Greek god Hades. And so they called this the gates of hell. That's what they called this place. And they built a temple here to worship the Greek god Hades. Also, over in this section here, you'll see another temple built to the god Pan, the shepherd god. Right between here, between these two temples, they actually would have an idol placed in one of these spots, and there would be a giant dance going way into the night, all about lust. And the culture was all about that. So if we zoom in for a second, the next picture, you'll see inside these little areas, they would place a statue of Pan, and the people would worship and they would dance before the shepherd god and say, we want you to govern our life. Lust governs our life. Lust for stuff, lust for pleasure. Pan is our shepherd, they would say. It's helpful to understand when we get to Jesus' phrase. I'll give you one more thing. If you've seen any of the movies about the Greek-Roman gods that have been out for the last 5 years, let me mention a few of them and see if you notice a pattern. Because when John is writing the Gospel of John, it's very different from the other 3 synoptic Gospels. Brand new material in there. Because he's writing to a group of people in Asia Minor who are very, very familiar with the Greek-Roman culture. And he wants to show Jesus is the true vine, the true bread, and the true shepherd. A little background, I'll show you how this looks. If you look at the Greek gods, here's their family. Is the Greek god family. Demeter, if you ask somebody in Rome, who's the bread of life? They would say, oh, Demeter, she's the one that gives us grain. If you said, well, who's the gate of life? They would say, oh, Hades. We even have a place in Caesarea Philippi called the gates of hell that Jesus brought his disciples when he said, upon that rock, my church will be built, and the gates of hell will not prevail. If you ask somebody who the father was, they say, oh, Zeus is the father. He's not a good father. He sleeps around with anyone and everyone. But that's the father of the culture. Who's the light of the world? They would say Apollo. There's all kinds of temples all over the ancient world to the light of the world being Apollo. Dionysus, we'll talk about next week, is the vine, the one who gave us wine, the one who invented acting. Athena, I am the truth. Hermes, I am the messenger. Asclepius, I am the living water. And Pan, I am the shepherd. Now, isn't that interesting? So when Jesus shows up and says, I am the good shepherd, he's contrasting his good shepherding from the bad shepherd their culture knew. He'll even reference the idea that just as Pan has a flute he plays that leads to destruction, Jesus plays a flute that leads to abundant life. Now, we look at that culture and say, well, thank goodness we've come a long way since then. We're nothing like those Greek Romans. We're not in a culture obsessed with sexuality and sensuality and pleasure. Thank goodness progress has shown so well. I'm not bowing down to some god like that. I'm not going to some crazy ritual like that. Or are we? I read a book several years ago that I actually use in my own life, and it's called The 12 Temptations Men Face. It should be called the 12 Temptations that people face. And it talks about the music that Pan still plays today that we listen to. The 12 steps to an affair it speaks about. And I want to walk through these steps and see if maybe you're listening to the voice of Pan even today. 12 stages to an affair. The first stage is this: readiness. Before you end up moving away from your spouse, having an affair, it just begins with stage one. You're ready. You're leaning away from your marriage. You're just like, he's never going to change. She's never going to get it. Just too hard. Maybe I married the wrong person. Maybe it's not God's will. Maybe God wants me to be happy. Maybe. And you're just leaning away from your marriage. You haven't noticed anybody else yet, but you're leaning away, and you're on your way to an affair. Pan is beginning to play his flute. The next step is alertness. You're alert to somebody else. Not somebody you're romantically involved in. You just notice somebody, and their strengths are different from your spouse's strengths. And you say, I wish my wife was like that. I wish my husband was like that. I wish my wife could get that, do that. And now you begin to compare that person's strengths to your spouse's weaknesses. Haven't you done that? See, we all look good from a distance, like my house. And the problem is when you live with somebody, you know where all the stink is, right? I mean, we know, at the drop of a hat, we can name all the ways our spouses stink. And I know my wife can name all the ways I stink. And the problem is when you're alert to somebody else, the reason it's called a fantasy is because you compare the best of who they are to the worst of who you're with. You're alert to that person. And then what happens is you begin to have an innocent meeting. It's after a soccer game or a tennis match, and you say, wow, your son did a great job today. Oh, your daughter did great too. And you have an innocent meeting. And you notice this person, you like conversation with them. They seem to connect with you more. It's truly innocent, but then you move on to an intentional meeting. The next time after the business meeting, you say, hey, can we stay and talk about that project a little longer? After the next soccer game, I heard Billy's going to have a birthday party. I'd love to help you plan it. Maybe we could do it together. You're intentionally finding a way to spend time. Hey, I'll catch you up on Facebook. Hey, let's talk a little more. And you don't realize you're 4 stages into an affair, and you don't even realize you've been listening to the voice of Pan. A public lingering. Oh my goodness, now it's after the soccer game. All the other parents have gone home, and your son and daughter are pulling on your pants saying, why are we still here? Because you're still talking. Because you're beginning to have an emotional affair. Next stages, you move from public lingering to private lingering. Hey, you know what? Let's work on that project together. How about that? Let's grab some dinner tonight, and we'll just finish it up so we'll be ready for tomorrow. It's about business. And somebody comes and says, I'm not sure that's real appropriate. And you would say, it's just lunch. What's the big deal? It's just lunch. Don't be so judgmental. Don't be so sensitive. Your spouse is like, I'm kind of uncomfortable with this. Come on. You don't even see it. Because you're following a shepherd who's out to kill and destroy. You purposely begin to isolate yourself from the group. Hey, let's meet together. Personal isolation. Now you're no longer talking about the birthday party. You're no longer talking about the business deal. You're truly just getting together to enjoy each other. You're talking on Facebook just to enjoy conversation with each other. And then after that meal or after that meeting, hey, well, good to see you. I'll give you a quick hug. Next time it's a little bit longer hug. Pretty soon it's a more passionate hug. And now you're headed toward an affair. And you're not at the affair now. You've been at the affair. You've been listening to the music of Pan all along. My best friends built a dream house. And that dream house cost him his home. Because in order to pay for that dream house, he more and more had to stay at work, and he was only home on the weekends. And with that, he began to lean away from his marriage because his wife wasn't real grateful he wasn't there, and he didn't think she was really grateful how hard he was working. She began, at the time Facebook first came out, she began to reconnect with some old friends. And their house, as beautiful as it was, destroyed their home. And he just walked down each one of these steps, and she walked down each one of these steps. And God wants to be the kind of shepherd who can save you from pain. And I got to tell you, over the years, I have felt the voice of Pan in my life. I don't want to be convicted when I'm right here. Oh my goodness, it's only passionate embracing. I want God to convict me as a shepherd here when I'm leaning away from my marriage. And he has over the years. There's been times God has caught me when I'm alert to somebody else. I'm comparing their strengths to my wife's weaknesses. And I say, God, help me. Be my shepherd. Lead me back to leaning into my marriage for you. So with that in mind, now let's look at Jesus' words as to how it communicated to the culture, the Roman culture and the Jewish culture when he says this. We're going to move now from the bad shepherds that lead us to the good shepherd. Look what Jesus says in John 10. He says this, the thief, there's a different kind of shepherd. A thief, and Leviticus and Corinthians tell us that behind every idol, every foreign god is actually a demonic or satanic activity. And that may be weird for you, but the Bible says that behind these false gods are spiritual forces trying to destroy you. The thief, the bad shepherds, they do not come except to steal your joy, steal your marriage, destroy your happiness, kill and destroy. If you follow certain shepherds, they're like thieves. And they're trying to steal, kill, and destroy. Now, you'd think kill and destroy are redundant. This person is so out to destroy you, they want to kill you and then keep kicking you around afterwards. That's the heart of what Pan is about to do. That's the heart of what this other shepherd wants to do. Jesus says, but I have come in contrast to that. If you follow my lead, that you may have life, and that they may have it more abundantly, the best kind of life, the best kind of marriage, the best kind of relationships, the best kind of friendships. For I am the good shepherd. Why not just say shepherd? Because there's a bad shepherd out there. I'm the good shepherd. And here's how you'll know. The good shepherd gives his life for his sheep. And in this phrase is so much meaning pointing back to the Old Testament, if you're a Jewish audience, and pointing to the gods of the Roman world, if you're a secular audience. Jesus is basically saying in this phrase, I am the good shepherd. And that phrase, I am, would immediately grab their attention. Here's what it would sound like. Yahweh, good shepherd. Yahweh, good shepherd. Immediately, did he just say Yahweh? Yahweh comes directly out of the book of Exodus. What's it say in Exodus? Moses comes to a burning bush. Take off your sandals, this is holy ground. I'm going to send you to deliver my people. Well, who shall I say has sent them? And what does he say? Let's look. What's it say in Exodus? In Exodus it says, I am the good shepherd who gives his life. So this phrase, I am from John, comes directly out of Exodus. Next slide, look at Exodus. In Exodus it says, I am has sent you. Next slide whenever you got it. I am. When Jesus says, I am the good shepherd, he is saying the very name of God that the Jewish audience wouldn't even write that name down. It was so sacred. They would use the word Jehovah because they didn't want to say the name Yahweh from Exodus because it was considered so sacred to them. I will skip Exodus. I'm going to move on to Numbers. The other thing that's embedded here is that when Jesus says, I am the good shepherd, he's pointing to Exodus as I am, and then he's pointing to the book of Numbers, because in the book of Numbers, God said, my people are like sheep without a shepherd. And they are like sheep without a shepherd. And they need leadership in their life. They need a shepherd in their life to go through the different challenges and to work with their own stink underneath the surface in their life. And so here's what he says. He says, if you follow me, book of Jeremiah, if you follow me, if you reach out to me, I will send you shepherds after my own heart. I'm going to give you shepherds that will lead you into the path you need to go in. However, if you know the Old Testament, or you know the basic outline of the Bible, let me give it to you. God starts off and he gives them judges. Actually, he gives them Moses. Do they obey? No, they don't listen to that shepherd. He gives them Joshua. Do they listen to Joshua? No, they disobey him. He gives them judges. Do they follow the judges? No. They still disobey. So then he gives them kings. Do you think the kings worked out? No, they didn't work out either. And so the prophets come and say, God has tried every kind of shepherd, shepherds after his own heart, and you still aren't following him. So, and this is so cool. In the book of Ezekiel, God says, none of that's worked out. So here's the promise. I am going to be the shepherd who comes from heaven to earth to lead my people. And now God is leading. He's referencing in this phrase shepherd, Exodus, Numbers, Jeremiah, and now Ezekiel. Look what it says in Ezekiel. This is so amazing. In Ezekiel, he says, I myself will search for my sheep and will seek them out as a shepherd seeks out his flock. The prediction of the Old Testament is you'll know the Messiah is here because it is God himself coming to earth to be the shepherd for the wayward sheep. And Jesus, with all this in mind, comes to a culture, some people following Pan, the shepherd. Some people aware of the Jewish predictions and says, Yahweh, good shepherd. It is the clearest claim to be God, fulfilling so many scriptures in one note. And embedded in here, he says, and I'm the kind of shepherd that if you allow me to hold on to you, nothing can snatch you out of my hand. Not circumstances, not addiction, not difficulty, not pain, not a divorce. Nothing can snatch you out of my hand. Here's how he says it in the book of John. For you do not believe because you are not of my sheep. As I said to you, so notice this, so you can be not his sheep. There has to be a moment in your life, then you say, God, I want to be in your flock. And if you choose to say, God, I want you to be my shepherd, I want to be in your flock, there becomes a moment of belief that you join his flock. And when you join his flock, you become one of his sheep, and you know how to hear his voice. And God knows you. He's not a shepherd that's like, there's a cog in the wheel, you stick a number on him. He knows you by name. What you struggle with, what you need, what you're worried about. And I give them, you don't earn it. You don't do enough good works to find it. He gives you eternal life as a gift. And you have the promise that you shall never perish. Never. He goes on, here's what he says. He says, and nothing can snatch you out of my hand. Neither shall anyone snatch them out of my hand. For my Father, who has given them to me, is greater than all, and no one is able to snatch them out of my Father's hand. God's basically saying, whatever circumstance you face, whatever stupid things you've done, whatever bad things have been done to you, nothing is more powerful than my dad, and nothing can snatch you out of my hand. And so this is the security by which you can live life from, knowing that you are loved by me. It's my daughter Sierra, by the way. She's 20. And thank you. Move this over here if you want. Sierra, when she was young, we had all kinds of spiritual conversations, sometimes in the hot tub, sometimes before night. And one day she said, how do I know that God can't let go of me? How do I know for sure that I can't lose a relationship with God? I said, well, honey, grab my hand. And so I had her grab my hand. I said, who's holding who here? And she said, well, we're holding each other. I said, okay, go ahead and let go of me. I said, now try and get away from your dad. And so she's trying to get away. She's gotten stronger over the years, by the way. She's trying to get away. And I said, see, even if you let go of me, I'm not let go of you. And you might have seasons of doubt, seasons of difficulty, seasons, I don't understand what God's doing. God says, listen, nothing can snatch you out of my hand. You can't even snatch yourself out of my hand because Dad's got you. My Father's got you. That's the promise he's offering. And, we've all had kids who've had seasons in our lives when they've said, I hate you. I don't like living here. You've made my life miserable, right? And in that moment, did they not become your children? Now, you may not have wanted them to be your children if you're really honest. But see, as the father, as the mature one, you go, sometimes kids lose their mind. Sometimes kids have bad days. Sometimes they have outbursts of anger. It doesn't change the relationship. That emotion, that moment, that difficult moment doesn't snatch them out of your hand. In fact, the unconditional love you showed during that time, the forgiveness, the guidance, the hey, let's talk about this. Dad's still here. That unconditional love becomes the security of the relationship. And that's what God is offering here. Jesus is saying, nothing can snatch you out of my hand. And that is the security you have. And one more note. Did you know Jesus played an instrument? Metaphorically, at least. Jesus plays the flute. And he references this in another passage in the Bible. And it's interesting that he talks about a shepherd and a shepherd that played a pan flute. He has another reference to the fact that he plays a flute. He references, it would be like me quoting a movie today. Jesus references the movies of the day, Aesop's Fables. So if you know Aesop's Fables, the sort of classic one is the Boy Who Cried Wolf. A not so famous one is one called The Fisherman and His Flute. And Jesus one day is referencing this Aesop fable, and he quotes it directly and applies it to himself. Here's what Jesus says. I came to get your attention, but what shall I like in this generation? It's like children sitting in the marketplaces calling to their companions and saying, quote from Aesop's Fables, we played the flute for you, and you did not dance. We mourned to you, and you did not lament. And he's contrasting. There's two ways God's trying to get your attention. Sometimes he tries it through the flute, so you'll dance and you'll experience abundant life. Other times God plays the lament to you, hoping you'll mourn and come to grips with your own brokenness. He goes on and says, John the Baptist played the lament, and I played the flute. Here's how he says it. John came neither eating or drinking, and they said, that guy's got a demon. He's like hellfire and brimstone guy. I don't want anything to do with that God. But then the Son of Man came, and I played the flute. I tried to draw you in, woo you to God through the joy. And you know what you said about me? When I ate with you, when I dined with you, you said, oh, the Son of Man. Look, he's a glutton. He eats all the time. Oh, he hangs out with wine bibbers. He's out with people who drink alcohol. He's a friend of tax collectors and sinners. But wisdom is justified by her children. Jesus is saying, I played the flute. I tried to woo you in. You might like the old fire and brimstone of John the Baptist. I came to give you life and life more abundant, and you didn't respond to my flute. You didn't dance. Oh my goodness, there's a God who loves me. Oh my goodness, there's a God who wants to securely, unconditionally love me no matter what I've done or where I've been. You were supposed to dance to that message, and you didn't. Because instead of listening to the flute of one shepherd, you've been listening to the flute of a bad shepherd. So how do we find out who our shepherd really is? Now, I'm not saying what you call yourself. You know, I call myself a Christian. I believed in Jesus when I was 2 years old, and I have followed him since. But daily, I don't often act like he's my shepherd in my decisions. So I want to propose to you, if you want to figure out who your shepherd is, your functional shepherd, trace your choices to your shepherd's voice. Why do you get so angry? Why do you get so fearful? Why did you choose to do this and not that? Is it because status is running your life? Performance is running your life? Are you struggling with your identity because of how you look, because appearance has become your voice? Did you choose this activity versus that activity because money is your real shepherd? I think there's two questions we should ask ourselves. When you look at your daily choices and daily decisions, are you following the good shepherd or some other God shepherd? See, the Bible says the biggest problem in the human heart is that we follow idols. An idol is simply not a good shepherd, but just another God shepherd. Sometimes it's good things. I find my identity by how I look, by what kind of a husband I am, whether or not people like me, whether or not I'm productive. Those are God shepherds, and they don't lead to abundant life. They'll bless you on the way up, and they'll crush you on the way down. Second thing is this. Whose flute are you listening to today? When you think about how you process decisions, when you look at what's coming out of your heart these days, are you finding love, joy, peace, gentleness, self-control coming out in your relationships? If not, you're probably not following the shepherd today. It might be time to say, God, the stuff coming out of my heart is anger and bitterness and vengefulness and depression and God, I must not be following your leading and your flute. God, help me hear your music. Help me lean into your way. So how can you trust a shepherd that you may not know, or one that you, just based on a bad experience you had with religion or with pastors, certainly we've been terrible examples, you said, I don't know if I can trust this God. And that's why Jesus said, I want you to know you can trust me as a good shepherd because I came to die for you. And so when you wonder, like, what's going on? All I can see is your heel. You can trust my heart. Oh, what's going on? I don't know if God, I don't think I want to go his way. That doesn't seem like it's going to work in the situation. Trust me. I was willing to give my life for you. Reminds me of one of my favorite stories with my grandfather. My grandfather was a Marine. He was a man who had a huge impact in my life. Electrical engineer, World War II, Marine. The later years of his life, he became very, very depressed because he found his identity in helping other people, and now he had to be cared for. I was caring for him one summer, wiping him and bathing him, and he just had lost all sense of worth because his worth had been, though he's a Christian, in being productive. I just saw this mentor, this shepherd, this incredible man in my life losing his hope. Grandpa loved games. He was a real joyful person. His whole basement was a giant train set. He was an electrical engineer. I mean, you could push buttons and all kinds of amazing things would happen. But he had not been to his basement in 2 years because of his illness. The problem is his backyard had a huge steep incline directly down into a lake. And the only way to get to his house besides going down the stairs would be there was a basement door, but he couldn't get his little rascal that he was driving around in down that steep slope. My dad said, what if we take this summer and we actually put in retaining walls and change his backyard so he can get to his basement? I said, that would be great. I was in college at the time. My dad had 32 tons of dirt delivered that had to be moved by wheelbarrow. I remember the railroad ties came. I literally picked up the railroad ties and I carried them like this. I was a sophomore in college. I would bring them down on this incredibly steep slope. We'd begin to build a retaining wall. I'd pound those nails in. Sweaty, slivers, painful, hard to see the progress. And the whole time I thought, I'm doing this for my grandfather. Another railroad tie. In fact, a couple times I've been thinking, boy, this is what Jesus did for me. In order for me to come into God's abode, he carried a cross. He had this nail not pounded into the wood, but through his hand and through his feet. All because he wanted me to have access to his house. We then dumped wheelbarrow after wheelbarrow. We'd fill it up, walk around again, dump another load. After a month of dumping 32 tons in, it finally got flat enough that you could walk. And I said, let's get Grandpa now. My dad's like, yeah, we got to have grass. Oh. So we're doing the grass seed, sowing the seed. We got to wait weeks for the grass to come up. And finally that day came that we said, Grandpa, today's the day. And I stood on one side of the rascal and my dad on the other. And we steadied him as we went around the playhouse that my grandma loved. And we got into this new downward section of the retaining wall, and Grandpa's just getting excited. And he's like, so thank you, thank you. As we make our way down, we open the door to his basement, and he comes in, and his eyes just get gigantic. And he sees his tools and his toys and his trains. With tears in his eyes, he says, I cannot thank you enough. And I got tears in my eyes. At that moment, every railroad tie on my back, every swing of that hammer was worth it to see my grandfather in the place he belonged. Jesus says, you can trust me as the good shepherd because I sacrificed for you that you could come into the place you belong, my presence, God's presence, not just in heaven, but even now. And I don't think there's any place that makes that more clear or reference to the Old Testament more when Jesus said, I am the good shepherd, than Psalms 23. So I'd like to pray this prayer over you. And as I pray it, I'd like you to ask yourself, God, are you really my shepherd? Or maybe another way to say is, God, I want this to be more true in my life. I know these words, but they're not really etched upon my heart. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. Oh, he restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. And yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. And you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runneth over, and surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen.
Amen.